The most controversial tripod in War of the Worlds history is actually a recent design, appearing on a £2 coin issued by the Royal Mint only a couple of years ago. And can you tell why it's controversial? I'll give you 4 guesses. Yep, that's right, it seems that this tripod, you know, the things that most people refer to as a tripod, was given 4 legs by the designer, making it a quadrupod. Well, it's either an extra leg or I dread to think what else it may be. Interestingly, I've just discovered a twist to this story that I haven't seen anyone else mention. It's quite funny, but let's start from the beginning. So I call it the most controversial tripod, but how controversial is it exactly? Well, there have been many criticised designs over the years, yet no matter how divisive some previous depictions have been, I don't think any other has spawned as many news articles about them as this one did. The artist behind the design says this controversy is primarily the result of typical one-sided sensationalist news reporting that isn't telling the full story as to why this fighting machine was given 4 legs. So what is the full story, and how did it end up on this coin? Well, it was released as part of the 2021 UK Commemorative coin set, alongside others that was celebrating various events, such as the 250th anniversary of the birth of Sir Walter Scott, the Queen's 95th birthday, and this really cool looking John Logie Baird 50p. That reminds me more of Orson Welles, to be honest. I'd have just put a TV set on it, like the way the Alexander Graham Bell coin literally just puts a dialing pad. Also, I just discovered there's a £2 coin commemorating 25 years of the £2 coin. Huh? A couple of years prior in 2018, several artists had been invited to design a coin for this set to commemorate the 75th anniversary of H.G. Wells's death. With multiple drawings submitted, the Royal Mint Advisory Committee reviewed and shortlisted the designs that they liked, before finally choosing the winner, American artist Chris Costello, who has not only contributed many designs for the US Mint, but also did the Royal Mint's 400th anniversary of the Mayflower Voyage coin for 2020. Naturally, the design celebrating Wells's life does not just utilise the War of the Worlds, but also other iconic works of his as well. This included by featuring the Invisible Man in the foreground, which is weird because the Royal Mint already did a coin of the Invisible Man a year earlier. Oh wait, no, that was Elton John. But also Costello's design is encircled by clock numerals, as a reference to Wells's first novel The Time Machine, as well as representing the author as a futurist, which might actually be the only element of this design that was not controversial. Indeed, amazingly, nearly every part of this coin generated quite a bit of criticism. I'll get to that later, let's stick with the tripod for now. In preparation for designing the coin, Costello says he read excerpts and reviewed other artists' interpretations, but wanted to avoid copying any existing artwork and create something completely original. When unveiled by the Royal Mint, naturally the originality of it caused quite a stir due to the fighting machine, colloquially called tripods and referred to as such in the book, was given 4 legs. I particularly found the way CNN reported on this quite funny, saying the coin was described by the Royal Mint as a spine-chilling design when it was unveiled on Monday, but it was the coin's inaccuracies that terrified fans of the author, although many noted that it was at least a good thing that the Royal Mint wanted to commemorate him, including 2 vice presidents of the H.G. Wells Society who spoke out about the coin. Professor Adam Roberts, who authored a biography of the author, said, "It's honestly heartening to see Wells memorialised. I think most Wellsians feel that way." And Dr. Stephen Baxter, who wrote The Massacre of Mankind, the Wells estate-endorsed War of the Worlds sequel, likewise said he thought that Wells would have been very flattered by the coin, but infuriated by that non-tripod. It's not just the extra leg, but the stiffness of it. Indeed, the hinges connecting the legs to the body remind me somewhat of the Tintin tripods, which if you'd be interested in a video about the Tintin tripods, like this video, as that lets YouTube know to recommend this series to you, which already includes a video about the first ever tripods, which Baxter then referenced, saying, Wells in the book itself has a sideswipe at the stiff, stilted tripods originally illustrated by Warwick Goebel. Adam Roberts likewise said, it's a little surprising the Royal Mint signed off on such elementary errors. However, Chris Costello refutes the accusation that it was a mistake, pointing out that other depictions have shown them with 4 or more legs previously, saying, my decision to also go off script was intentional because it's what creative people do. Indeed, there is a clear indication that giving it extra legs was a deliberate choice, as his initial sketch of the imagery actually has it as having 5 legs. He said this showed a crab-like image with legs and multiple swirling appendages. This description seems to suggest he was actually intending to portray the handling machines. However, he simplified the design as it appeared too confusing for a coin design. The subject needed to coordinate with the rest of the composition, so I minimized the machine by reducing the number of appendages and created one arm curling out of the frame for dynamism. He further elaborated on these changes, saying, the War of the Worlds has been imagined in many different ways, and I also wanted to create a new artistic interpretation that was original and contemporary. My design was inspired by the variety of machines illustrated in books and in cinema, including tripods and handling machines, which have 5-jointed legs and multiple appendages. As a child, they reminded me of jellyfish and spider-like robots, so I wanted to distill those impressions into one machine. I honestly did not think I would win the competition, because the chances are always so small when you are competing with some of the best artists in the world. It was a risky design, and I was pleased that the mashup of ideas had appealed to the Royal Mint Advisory Committee in such a positive way that it rose to the top. I was quite excited when I found out that I won, and I can't wait to get my hands on one of these coins. In the statement on the Royal Mint's website that initially announced the design, Costello stated that it was inspired by vintage H.G. Wells book covers and movie posters. Who can forget the spine-chilling jellyfish-like robots conceived in the promotions for the War of the Worlds? That creature was my favourite, and I created my own interpretation of it that would take advantage of the circular canvas and appear to climb out of the composition. However, interestingly, they quickly removed this statement from the website within days. I suspect that when he says he was inspired by book covers and jellyfish-like robots, it sounds to me like he's referencing the Edward Gorey tripods, considering not only are the Gorey tripods specifically very reminiscent of jellyfish, but my first reaction to analysing the coin's design was, oh, someone took the head of the Gorey tripods and gave them a different body. In fact, my 3D model that I quickly hacked together literally just reused the head from my Gorey model with minimal changes. I did make it gold though in reference to the coin, and just to differentiate it further. So that's my little bit of originality. Although I do think the head is more different to Gorey's than I'm giving it credit for. While it seemed that most people had a problem with Costello's appendage addition, naturally there's some people that didn't, with Professor Anthony Rees defending it, while I suspect referencing Costello's desire to make the design contemporary by saying, presumably not too seriously, something along the lines of, Martians are likely to experience mutations due to high levels of radiation exposure. Over a span of 123 years, it's distinctly possible for pod gene duplication to occur. A more stable 4-legged tetrapod would be subject to intense evolutionary selection. It's clear that the experts of H.G. Wells's work are not keeping up with the scientific findings. Costello stated, the design was not meant to be a literal reference to the original script, but was purposefully created to be unique and representative. As the artist, designing a war machine with 4 appendages was my deliberate choice, which represents a fictional construct as I imagine it, and tells the story as I would tell it as a coin designer. However, I think that the specific context of it being a coin is what makes it such a seemingly egregious change, possibly. It's not like it's yet another artist designing one of the possibly hundreds of book covers that there have been over the years, for instance, or someone choosing to create their own film that's based on the story. I feel like the tripod is perhaps the single most recognisable image of Wells's entire bibliography, or a contender for it anyway. So to be creative in a way that isn't just coming up with a new design for it, as many do, but outright changes what it is perhaps going too far in terms of the context of the coin's purpose. Like, it's no longer a tripod, it's a quadrupod. It literally fundamentally changes what is described in the text. To be fair, the Royal Mail seemed to encourage doing something different. As he said, I was required to create designs that were original and unique, capturing the essence of the author's style with imagination, inventiveness and creativity, based on the direction of the Royal Mail's Based on the direction from the Royal Mint's creative brief, I was looking forward to creating a never-before-seen coin design concept. Actually, it's pretty interesting how it does kind of open the question of what goes too far, in much the same way the Fox series, for me, made me wonder at what point is an adaptation so changed that it's no longer an adaptation. It's fascinating to think about. Imagine making the Shakespeare coin contemporary by using a robot head instead of a skull. I don't know if that's a good analogy, so here's another. Costello says the process of designing the Mayflower coin was similar to the Wells one, saying, there are no known examples of what the Mayflower ship looked like, so I was free to create my own romanticized interpretation of the ship that would also translate to a successful coin design. Similarly, as Wells's stories have been interpreted in many ways, I had much latitude to envision my own contemporary interpretations. With the Mayflower, however, it's still known that it's a ship, and consequently, just because no one knows what it looked like, you couldn't make it contemporary by portraying it as a plane, for instance. The point I'm trying to make with these ridiculous analogies that, are obviously far worse than the four-legged tripod, is I'm trying to hammer home that it breaks out of the boundaries of what is known about it. The text describing the novel can, of course, be interpreted artistically. Others have done the same, even more egregiously, but I think it's just the fact that the coin was created with the specific purpose of commemorating Wells that makes straying so far from what Wells specifically wrote inevitably controversial. I mean, just the fact that people refer to this with the oxymoronic phrase four-legged tripod is kind of emblematic of how it's a design that breaks away potentially too much from what Wells described. It was naturally and obviously going to cause people to say, hold up, did the artist seriously give that tripod four legs? That being said, ultimately, regardless of the extra leg, I feel like it's still recognisable as a fighting machine, to be fair, as in without context, people would still look at it and know what it is. Plus, it did get a lot of publicity for the coin, which I presume wasn't the intention, but arguably that's a good thing, maybe? I don't keep up with the Royal Mint's latest releases, so I doubt I would have heard about the coin had it not been for the famous four-legged tripod. And in some ways, I feel like it kind of makes the coin more desirable and interesting as an oddity, if that makes sense. Ever since I heard of it years ago, I've kind of wanted one. However, along with the rest of the 2021 UK commemorative set, these coins were uncirculated, meaning they were only available by buying them directly from the Royal Mint's website. The celebrating the life and work of H.G. Wells coin not only came as a standard £2 coin, however, there was also a limited edition, just 175 available, gold-proof version that's very pretty. But then again, it should be for £1,225. Who the heck is paying that for a coin? So anyway, I finally got one, the standard version that is. I got it specifically so I could make this video properly, or at least that's my excuse for finally bothering to buy one. Got it well cheap as well, and mine was the H.G. Wells brilliant uncirculated coin cover. Well, I'll be the judge of whether it's brilliant or not. It's limited to 10,000, and by the way, that's not the coin that's limited, it's the cover. You know, this piece of card that you could probably print out yourself and make if you really wanted to. It's covered with some exclusive stamps of the time machine, which I guess that's actually probably the valuable part of it. And the back has a great quote from that novel that everyone should take note of, and the front has a nice picture of young H.G. Wells. Inside there's a card talking about Wells's life, and ironically includes pictures of the other controversial tripods that he famously disapproved of. Interestingly, this was not the only cover you could buy, and here's the very bizarre twist to this story that despite all the conversation generated by this design, I haven't seen mentioned by anyone else. And that is that you could also get the coin in packages that were printed with some really nice custom artwork, featuring the silhouettes of many four-legged tripods in the background. However, in the most forefront prominent depiction of it on this landscape, it has 3 legs. So it's like even whoever designed the packaging for the coin was like, I swear these things are meant to have 3 legs and tentacles. Indeed, I think it looks really good here, like it iconically looks like how you expect tripods to look. It goes to show how Costello's tripod isn't necessarily bad just because it has 4 legs, and actually isn't far from being really good, I'd say, by just being portrayed slightly differently and removing the unnecessary extra leg. Maybe the suggestion might be that this leg being kind of slightly thicker than the others indicates perhaps that the 4th leg is behind that one, but I think the artists knew what they were doing, especially given how different the tripod generally is here. The legs are outright depicted significantly differently, no longer being all angled. The tripod here looks really tall and somewhat elegant, I guess. Furthermore, the head seems less flat, which really accentuates the uniqueness of it. Reminds me of a bell for some reason. Plus, they added more accurate tentacles, as opposed to the claw, which this version outright removes. I guess it's retracted into the body in this image, and I think whoever it was did a great job of slightly tweaking and adapting the coin's design, and also further highlights that, ignoring the controversial aspects of it, the original design is actually quite fine. Literally just minor changes to the design that Costello came up with, and it wouldn't have had anywhere near the amount of criticism that it did. As previously stated though, the 4-legged tripod was not the only controversial aspect of the coin, with Dr. Stephen Baxter pointing out that the Invisible Man is also depicted inaccurately as well, which is kind of a funny sentence when you think about it. Like what, did he make him the Visible Man or something? Well, as Baxter said, you wouldn't think you could get the Invisible Man wrong, but he never wore a top hat in the book, with Professor Adam Roberts elaborating on how this depiction does not fit with the characterization of the character, saying that the Invisible Man was no gentleman and did not wear a top hat. He arrives at Ipping face bandaged under a wide-brimmed hat. However, looking at Costello's early sketch once more reveals that he was aware of this and originally portrayed him with such a hat, meaning not doing this was yet again a deliberate design choice and not an unknowing mistake. He explains that, as the design evolved, I began integrating the machine image with the figure of the Invisible Man. I had considered descriptions of his head being wrapped in bandages, but drawing a mummy-like face did not make the figure appear invisible on a small coin. Instead, I depicted a void between the torso and the hat was a more convincing design solution. The Royal Mint team and I discussed several styles of hats for the Invisible Man, including the wide-brimmed hat mentioned in his original work, and determined that the old Victorian top hat was the best stylistic contrast to the futuristic machine in the background. He also points out yet again how other artists have depicted the Invisible Man this way as well. But most importantly, he mentions that just as Wells himself veered from his original script with his sketch of the Invisible Man wearing a top hat, I embellished on the narrative in a way to create a more interesting coin design, which is a pretty darn good comeback to be fair, I'd say. Adam Roberts finally criticised yet another aspect of the coin, saying that the legend written around the rim of the coin, "Good books are the warehouses of ideas," is, though it's sometimes attributed to Wells by various internet quote sites, not an actual quotation by him. The Royal Mint responded to this simply by saying that the quote is wildly associated with H.G. Wells. Ironically, aside from these, what many considered as mistakes on the coin, there was also a manufacturing error that occurred with them as well. If you bought one of these £2 coins that was available to buy on their release in January 2021, there's a chance you may have received one that contained a minting error, where the nickel brass sections on the outside were accidentally far thicker than they were meant to be. Combining this with the fact that the coin was uncirculated and only available direct from the Royal Mint means that this mint error version is apparently incredibly valuable due to its immense scarcity and could fetch £1,000 at auction, according to a coin expert simply identified as Rachel. I just checked mine, but alas, it seems to be in proper proportions. What this error does reveal, however, is the way Chris Costello skillfully designed it so the circular nature of the coin matches perfectly with the head of the tripod, if that makes sense. I don't think I've ever seen any other coin imagery that utilises the shape of its metal canvas in such a way, which I think shows why Chris Costello has made so many coin designs. Despite the criticism, I think he's done a very good job of designing it in terms of overall his collage is well done and fantastically composited. The numerals around the edge fit in really nicely and whatnot. Chris Costello's competently comprised crowded composition complements circular coin canvases cleverly, consequently completing commemorative collections, conclusively conquering competing competition contestants' creations. Curiously, considering criticism concerning Chris's conscious creative choices caused considerable controversy. It's pretty ambitious to try to put so much on one coin, yet he pulls it off, despite some arguably bizarre decisions regarding the content of the collage. But you could say the odd nature of it makes it more noteworthy. Not quite as noteworthy as the Jeff Wayne tripods, however. Click this video here to discover how this icon was created.